I, a 28-year-old woman, want to start this story by giving some context. I met Andrew, who's now 30, back when we were both sophomores in college. What first drew me to him was his drive. He was confident, ambitious, and talked about his future like he already had it mapped out. We were both business majors. I focused on finance, and he majored in business administration. We got paired for a group project, and our connection grew naturally from there. Even though we were broke students, he always found a way to make our dates special. He'd cook simple yet impressive dinners in his cramped apartment kitchen, and I loved how passionate he was about it. He told me he learned cooking from his grandmother, who raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was just 12. Cooking was his way of holding on to her memory, and I always admired that deeply. After we graduated, life seemed to fall perfectly into place. I landed a job at a mid-level investment firm, and Andrew got a position at one of the top financial companies in our city. We moved in together, got married 4 years later, and everything felt stable and promising. Andrew excelled in his career. He had a sharp analytical mind and a gift for communicating with clients. Within 5 years, he became a senior financial analyst earning over $150,000 a year. My own career was thriving too. I'd switched to a better firm 2 years ago at Andrew's encouragement. Despite his corporate success, Andrew never lost his love for cooking. Our apartment often turned into a weekend hub for friends, full of laughter, wine, and the smell of his latest culinary experiment. He'd host elaborate dinner parties with themed courses, like one where each dish represented a trip we'd taken together. Cooking was his outlet, his way to stay creative. But about 4 months ago, everything started shifting. Andrew began talking about feeling empty at work. He'd come home late, exhausted, and spend hours watching cooking shows or reading chef biographies. At first, I thought it was a passing phase. But then, 3 months ago, he told me we needed to have a serious conversation. He admitted that he'd been researching culinary schools and found one that offered an intensive 18-month program, the kind of place that produced famous chefs. He presented a full-blown plan: quit his job, complete the program, work in restaurants to gain experience, and eventually open his own place. He even had spreadsheets, deadlines, and potential restaurant names. The catch? The entire plan would wipe out nearly all our savings, around $65,000. That covered tuition, supplies, and basic living expenses. We'd be surviving solely on my income, which, while decent, was nowhere near enough to replace his. He showed me charts and budgets, promising it was doable if we tightened our belts. I was shocked, but part of me wanted to be supportive. After all, he'd backed my career moves before. When I switched firms and took a temporary pay cut, he was my biggest cheerleader. So we discussed it for weeks, the pros, cons, and financial risks. I even asked if he could attend part-time, but he insisted that the full program was essential. Eventually, I gave in. It seemed like a calculated risk, and on paper, it looked manageable. The first few weeks were exciting. Andrew came home brimming with stories about cooking techniques and culinary traditions. He'd practice at home, showing off his knife skills or trying to perfect sauces. He looked genuinely happy for the first time in months. But by the second month, the spark started fading. The program was brutally demanding. He left home at 6 in the morning and didn't return until after 8 at night. Standing all day and handling constant criticism drained him. Soon, he stopped cooking at home altogether. The man who once spent entire Sundays experimenting in the kitchen now just ordered takeout or boiled pasta. The joy he once radiated was gone. Financial pressure started building too. We canceled our long-awaited Europe trip, slashed our spending, and I began taking extra work just to stay afloat. The sense of stability we'd worked years to achieve was slipping through my fingers. Then last week, I found something that shattered my trust. While organizing paperwork in our home office, I stumbled upon documents for a $20,000 personal loan, one Andrew had taken without telling me. When I confronted him, he claimed it was for essential tools and workshops that would give him an edge in the industry. I was furious. We had always been transparent about money. This felt like a serious betrayal. Whenever I tried to calmly talk it through, he'd get defensive, insisting I didn't believe in him. He kept talking about his restaurant empire, while all I could see was a drained bank account and mounting tension. Yesterday, he brought up wanting to enroll in even more classes, which, of course, would cost more time and money. That was when it really hit me. The responsible, organized Andrew I'd fallen in love with was gone. This version of him was impulsive, blinded by his fantasy of becoming a chef, and completely dismissive of the life we built together. I admired his courage to follow his dream, but at what cost? Our once steady marriage was cracking. I caught myself resenting him and then hating myself for it. Was I being selfish or just realistic? Should I keep supporting him or urge him to return to his old career? When I posted about my situation online, people told me to be patient, that it had only been 3 months and transitions take time. I decided to try. I told myself I'd stay calm, be more understanding, and keep better track of our finances. Last week, I even planned a sweet surprise. I picked up food from his favorite deli, the same place we'd gone on our very first date, and brought it to his culinary school during lunch break, just to show my support. But what I walked in on changed everything. I found his classroom easily, but Andrew wasn't there. One of the students mentioned he was probably in the practice kitchen. When I stepped inside, my heart sank. Andrew was standing close behind a younger woman, later introduced as Julia, 25. He was guiding her hands as she chopped vegetables, his expression soft and relaxed, a version of him I hadn't seen in months. When they noticed me, he jumped back like he'd been caught doing something wrong. Julia smiled politely, but there was something off. She kept touching his arm while they spoke, making inside jokes I didn't understand. She casually mentioned how grateful she was for Andrew's help during their weekend study sessions at her apartment. Weekend study sessions? That was news to me. He'd been telling me he was practicing at school those weekends. When I looked at him, he wouldn't even meet my eyes. The car ride home was tense and silent. That night when I brought up Julia, he exploded. He accused me of snooping, insisting she was just a friend and dedicated student. When I pointed out that he had lied about where he'd been, he turned it around on me, saying my negativity and lack of faith were pushing him away. That fight broke something in me. For the first time, I truly doubted everything. A few days later, I checked our credit card statements. The results made my blood run cold. There were multiple charges at upscale restaurants and bars, all on weekends when he was supposedly studying. Some were far from his school or Julia's place. When I confronted him with the receipts, he changed his story again. Now these dinners were networking opportunities and research trips. I reminded him that we'd canceled our own dinners because of our tight budget, and he just snapped, yelling that I didn't understand his dream and that I was trying to control him out of jealousy. That's when I realized something painful but true. He hadn't just gambled away our savings. He'd gambled away our trust, our marriage, and our future, all for a fantasy that didn't include me anymore. And now, while I'm rebuilding from the ruins, he's the one begging for help. After our last argument, Andrew stormed out and stayed at his brother's for 2 nights. During that time, Jason, his brother, called me. We'd always gotten along. He even helped Andrew plan his proposal years ago. But this call wasn't friendly. Jason accused me of being controlling, saying I was suffocating Andrew's creativity. He claimed Andrew had been crying on the phone, saying I didn't understand him anymore. The man Jason described didn't sound like my husband. It sounded like a stranger. 2 days later, Andrew returned as if nothing had happened. He brought flowers, apologized for overreacting, and acted like everything was fine. But something in his eyes had changed, distant, cold. The next day, while doing laundry, I found a small notebook in the pocket of his chef's jacket. I knew I shouldn't look, but after weeks of lies and tension, I couldn't help myself. At first, it seemed harmless, recipe notes, sketches for dishes, until halfway through I found personal entries, ones that shattered me. He'd written about feeling trapped in our marriage. He said Julia, his classmate, lit something inside him, that she saw him as an artist, not just a husband or provider. Then I saw a list titled Starting Fresh. I quietly put the notebook back, my hands trembling. The man who wrote those words was not the man I'd built a life with. From that day on, I started preparing for the worst. Opened a private bank account, copied financial records, documented his absences. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't ignore what I already knew. Something was breaking beyond repair. Last week, the truth came crashing down, harder than I'd ever imagined. I got an email from an unknown address with the subject line, "Your husband and my girlfriend." It was from Eric, Julia's boyfriend. He told me he'd found messages between them after seeing her phone unlocked. Attached were screenshots, hundreds of them dating back months. At first, they talked about recipes. Then the tone shifted. Andrew complained about me, said I was obsessed with money and didn't understand his artistic side. They mocked me, calling me the banker, laughing about how blind I was. The screenshots showed them having study dinners at expensive restaurants, spending hundreds from that mysterious $20,000 loan. They called it research for their future restaurant. Yes, they were secretly planning to open a place together. The loan that was supposed to be for tuition and tools, it funded their dates and business dreams. Julia kept fueling his ego, calling him a genius, his culinary soulmate. He told her she made him realize he'd settled in our marriage. Reading those words felt like watching my life burn in slow motion. That night, I printed every message and spread them across our dining table, the same table where he used to cook for me, and waited. When Andrew came home and saw them, his face went white. His first words weren't "I'm sorry." They were, "How did you get these?" Even then, he was only worried about getting caught. When I confronted him, he tried to twist it all back on me, said my practicality drove him away, that Julia understood him. He called the debt an investment, the dinners research. Then came the final blow. He admitted they'd already paid a deposit on a restaurant space using our loan money. He'd even written his resignation letter, ready to drop out of school and start the business with her. That was it. I told him to pack his things and leave. He begged, said Julia meant nothing, that he was confused. But when I threatened to call the police, he finally left. A day later, Jason called to apologize. Apparently, Andrew had lied to his entire family too, painting me as cold and controlling. After that, the flood began, messages, apologies, please. He said he'd quit school, leave Julia, even reapply to his old job. He had his mother and friends call me, crying, begging. He even showed up at my office with flowers. Security had to escort him out. That's when I realized the man I married didn't exist anymore. The last few months have been chaos, lawyers, paperwork, endless nights of grief. But I'm finally free. The divorce is underway. After our separation, Andrew spiraled. He dropped out of culinary school and begged his old company to rehire him. They refused. Word had already spread about his affair and abrupt exit. Then karma struck again. Julia dumped him for another classmate. Turns out Andrew wasn't her first married conquest or her last. He called me drunk one night, sobbing that he'd ruined everything for nothing. I didn't answer. Not long after, I found out he'd racked up nearly $45,000 in secret debt. 2 hidden credit cards, both maxed out on gifts and fine dining. Thankfully, my lawyer ensured I wasn't liable for a cent. The judge was disgusted by how he spent our savings on his affair. I moved into a smaller apartment near work. It's quiet, peaceful, mine. I'm rebuilding my life, my savings, my confidence. Last month, I even got promoted. Some mutual friends say he's suffered enough. They tell me he's living with his parents, flipping burgers for minimum wage. But I feel no pity. He didn't just cheat. He lied, stole, humiliated, and destroyed our future. 10 years of love traded for a fantasy that barely lasted a season. The irony is poetic. He left a 6-figure job to follow his dream, and now he's a line cook in his parents' basement. As for me, I've started taking cooking classes again, this time for myself. My kitchen is small, but it feels alive, peaceful. Friends try to set me up, but I'm not ready. I'm learning who I am without him. And you know what? I'm happy. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying the person who hurt you, it's becoming someone they'll never deserve again. And I finally have my P. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a comment, hit subscribe, follow for more, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss the next one.